years ago at my home group Empire Way, and the context was it was like meeting somebody like already in motion, like in a rolling ball of energy, coming up ready to be of service, and was already sober and of service and had been of service, but I encountered her and like we got into a conversation about service that night. Like, yeah, I've been doing it. And I just, for giggles, looked up my phone, like at an old email, 2016, talking about, I was at the PICPC committee talking about youth panels at high schools. I really respect your service, especially District 15, stepping up. Wasn't the easiest time for you, and yet you followed through, and really with a profound service to the district and to Seattle. So, thank you.
Oh, that's me. All right.
That is you.
That is me. Oh, I have 30 minutes. How cool. All right, ready, set, go. No?
Introduce yourself and then I'll do it.
Okay, introduce myself. All right, my name is Sasha. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi,
Sasha.
Hi. Well, thank you all for being here this evening. I don't know why I actually carry my book up because my aim for y'all this evening is my hope is that I get to share what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. But I always carry my big book with me. It acts as my guide. It is my textbook, and the steps that are in this book have given me a design for living, which really works. So if I get lost, I'm going to go to my book because whenever I'm lost, my book helps me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's all worn and torn, y'all. I mean, like, this is what happens when you have this book. And I think I honestly got this book when I first came into the rooms, which was back in November of 2009. I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school. And I remember I was writing 17. I started drinking around 15 years old. Because I'm an alcoholic. I didn't really have a reason. I just wanted to drink. And actually, back in the early mid-ish 2010s area, I went to Roosevelt High School, and all the Seattle public high schools had these dances that were hosted by a couple of my friends, and they're citywide, King County-wide dances that I would go to. And then the guy that I was like kind of dating at the time was like, let's go, I'm going to get us some vodka. So I like downed a whole fifth of raspberry Smirnoff, and I felt so freaking good because I felt like I could take over the world. The doctor's opinion tells me that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect that alcohol has, right? I love that effect. I love that I could be anyone I wanted to be. I loved that I could be the best dancer, the best karaoke singer. I could be also better than you, like with alcohol. But take that away, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent until I can once again get that sense of ease and comfort from coming from the drink, right? So that's how my whole drinking career went. Granted, it wasn't very long because, like I said, I started at 15, got into the rooms by the time I was 17, and by the grace of God, I've stayed when I turned 18 years old. And so I remember going to my first AA meeting. It was a Thursday night in Magnolia. I went to through the Ryther program. I remember that very vividly. I went through the Ryther program, and my counselor at the time, I had disclosed some stuff which I thought was confidential, but apparently I was a danger to myself. So she told my mom, and was threatening to not threatening, but saying she would maybe have to get the authorities involved. I was driving drunk without a license, well, with a permit, so it's sort of legal, but my mom wasn't in the car, so it wasn't really legal. And I was driving drunk with gang members in my car, not my car, my mom's car, and just putting myself in very dangerous situations, like getting stranded on Mercer Island on a Wednesday on a school night at 3:00 in the morning, not having a way to get home. And so, again, this counselor informed my mom, and she's like, oh my God, you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, what the heck is that? I had no idea what Alcoholics Anonymous was at the time. No one in my family is an alcoholic. I am adopted, and I have been since I was 6 months old. And my mom is a single parent, and she raised me as such. And I'm literally the brown sheep of the family. And that being said, I've always felt different from and isolated from my family, let alone from anyone else. Again, I went to Roosevelt High School, and so that school is very white. So I felt very different. But when I drank, I was a part of. I was better, and I was better then. That was the best part of it. So when my mom tells me I got to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, my counselor at Ryder takes me to this Thursday night meeting in Magnolia, and I remember they split up into the steps, like the four groups, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I remember being like, can I go to 10, 11, 12? That woman looks at me, she shakes her head, she laughs out loud, which I was extremely offended by. She goes, absolutely not. And I say, why? I can save everybody. I know how to like help everyone, having no knowledge of the program, having no knowledge of Alcoholics Anonymous or how anything in this program works. So I end up in 1, 2, and 3. I remember we were going round robin, and I thought, because again, I knew nothing of Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought that this program was made for old white men who drank from brown paper bags under the bridge. Like that's honestly what I thought alcoholics were, and all that Alcoholics Anonymous was sob stories. And so I remember when they got to me, I didn't know I could pass at round robin. So I ended up like sharing and crying hysterically. My life is unmanageable. I don't know what to do with my life. And I remember walking out of that meeting, and the counselor lady goes like, "Nice act," and I was so offended again. I was like, "You hurt my feelings." So she says, "That meeting wasn't really for you, huh?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. They're all white and old, and they were 40. Actually, they were 40. I know. I was like, oh my gosh. I was 17, y'all. So like 40 seemed really unattainable for me at the time. So she says, okay, go to this young person's meeting. It was Lake City Young People's on Tuesday nights over off of 125th and 20th. Now it's moved. And I remember going to that meeting, and I remember the first thought I had was like, did my mom pay these people to be here? Because they were all kids my age, 18 to like 25. And I saw these people that were a little older than I was, that had 30 days, that had 6 months, that had a year. And I was like, how? How? I thought that 30 days was so unrealistic. I'm like, there's got to be a kick. There's got to be something to it. And I remember going to that meeting and hearing genuine laughter and joy in people's shares and in their stories. And I remember the laughter that I heard was that like that belly aching laughter that like makes your abs hurt. And I was like, I want that. I really want that, because I had lost any sense of joy in my life. And mind you, again, my drinking career was not long, but it got miserable very quickly. My disease, my alcoholism likes to go and take me down very quickly. So granted, I only had about 3 years of that drinking. And so I remember I went back to that meeting the following Tuesday because there was a really hot guy that went there. And I thought to myself, he's going to keep me sober. That's what's going to keep me sober. He was like tall, tan, Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm like, yes, honey, we're going to go. But I kept hearing the same laughter and joy in that meeting. And I was like, this is something I want. That seed had been planted. So again, mind you, this was back in 09. I went to that young person's meeting. And then come my senior year of high school, 09, 2010, I remember, I always thought I was too young to be an alcoholic because I had a lot of yets to experience, as our first speaker said, right? I hadn't gotten arrested. I hadn't gotten caught. I hadn't gotten a DUI. I hadn't any repercussions with the law. The only person that caught me was my mom. She never called the cops on me. I didn't crash and burn. I didn't lose everything except for my self-respect, my sense of self-worth, my self-esteem. I hadn't lost the materials because I had nothing to lose materialistically at the time. I still lived with my mom, right? Like, again, I was in high school, so I had nothing material to lose. However, I remember I wasn't ready. I loved going to the meetings. I loved them because I loved hearing the laughter and the joy. I'm like, that's so cool for them, but I will never have that. I wanted it, so I kept going back. So I remember I went off to college in McMinnville, Oregon. If you don't know where that is, don't go. You don't have no need to go. I went to Linfield College. And I remember getting in contact with somebody there, another student who actually had, I think at the time, like 3 or 4 years sober. I was like, what the heck? Then we kind of founded this young person's meeting on my campus, on Linfield, my campus. So self-centered, on the campus of Linfield College. And I remember going to that meeting and presenting myself like so well. Like I honestly feel like towards the end of my drinking, I was just this mausoleum. Like I was beautiful and blossoming, and everything was great and peachy on the outside, but on the inside, I was rotting and dying, spiritually and physically and emotionally and all this stuff. And so I remember one night, it was we met Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. That meeting, unfortunately, has since dissolved since after I graduated. Um, I remember one day this woman walks in and she kind of has this like beautiful strut to her, right? And it almost looked very Pocahontas, where like her hair, when she walked in the room, her hair went like, whoosh, and I was like, whoa. And I love Pocahontas. So I remember her walking in, and immediately I turned around and I already sensed this like serenity. And I remember saying, that's what I want. And I asked this woman to take me through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous and take me through the steps that are outlined in this book. And she thankfully said yes. I was honestly afraid that no one would want to work with me because I'm that special and I'm that crazy that no one would want to work with me. But she thankfully said yes, and we went through the book. And I remember her going to her and being like, she said, "We're gonna meet every week, once a week, on whatever day it was. You're gonna come to my house." And I didn't have a car. Remember, I didn't even have a license. I had a permit, but I didn't have a car or a license. And she says, "Well," and I asked her, "How am I gonna get to your house?" She says, "You're gonna walk." And I said, "Really?" She's like, "It's a 10-minute walk." I'm like, "But that's so far." But I was willing to do at that point anything to stay sober. Mind you, my sobriety date isn't until December 4th, 2010. So within my first semester of my college career, I was drinking. And I remember my first function, because I joined a sorority like a good alcoholic girl. I joined a sorority, and my first function was around the world. I remember my counselor at the time, I got assigned a behavioral counselor, suggested putting the beer taps in my pocket so I could control my drinking, to control and enjoy my drinking, right, Austrian? So I remember when my pockets were full, I would go straight to a bottle. I'm like, well, this is useless. And so I'd just empty them out and refill them or just grab a bottle. Like that's how I drank. I drank to black out. I drank to obliviate, to forget, to numb, to do anything that made me feel how I didn't want to feel. Uh, so I was like, I was also amped because he's like, hey, he's endorsing underage drinking. Let's go. So anyway, that aside, I remember telling my sponsor about this, and I remember her saying, well, isn't that a shame? And being like, that sucks. And are you now willing and ready to do anything to stay sober? And I said yes, because at that point I had burned almost every single bridge in my life. My mom was so scared of me. I'm honestly surprised she hadn't called the cops on me prior while I was staying with her in high school. She had was an attorney for King County for, by the time she retired, over 30 years, and so she knew what calling law enforcement could do to my future. And I know she didn't want that for my life, and so she never called the cops on me. And again, my mom is a single parent, right? And so raising me, holy guacamole, I can't even imagine the horror and the emotional turmoil I put her through. And I still make a living amends to her to this day. But I remember I would like get pride making my mom cry herself to sleep every night. Like that gave me joy towards the end of my drinking. I remember I chased my mom around the house with a butcher knife because that gave me joy when I was drinking. And I tell my sponsor, I'm like, I'm a happy drunk. I'm not a violent drunk. I never got mean. And then I told her the story about the knife. She goes like, Sasha, that's mean and that's violent. And I said, oh, oops, not good. And so I remember at that time, like again, my mom at that point almost had, I don't want to say given up, but she had kind of like lost everything. She had like gone through the whole checklist of things that she could do as a single parent. And she was almost like done with me. And so I remember going to my sponsor, Lavetta, and saying, I'm done. And so I remember going to her house that every whatever day it was, sitting down, reading the book. She read it to me. And I remember after a year, things didn't feel much different, to be quite honest. I went through the steps as best as I could at that time, but I still felt a little like different. I still am like, well, I'm 18 or 19 at the time. I'm still so young. There are no such thing as, 17, 18, 19-year-old alcoholics. It's not a thing. And I remember a year, it was like a week after I celebrated a year, I was raped at my school. And I remember calling my sponsor, was the first person I called. I said, Lavetta, I've been raped. I don't know what to do. The first thing she asked me is are you okay? And I said, I don't know. But the fact, and this is what shocked me, this is the power of the program, in my opinion, is that I didn't go back to the fraternity where it happened and drink myself into oblivion, to forget and to numb. I didn't do that. What I did was call my sponsor. I called Lavetta first, and I was like, that's truly the power of how the program had worked in my life up until then. And again, remember, I didn't feel much different after that first year. As our first speaker touched on, lifey life happens, and a lot of that happened in not a lot of that, but a lot of life happened in those 4 years that I was at school with and working with Lavetta. We went through the 12 steps several times through the big book, twice through the 12 and 12, and then there was also through a rabbi's perspective of the 12 steps and how he connected with a higher power. Because I always struggled with that for a really long time. I'm like, a book written by white Christian men in the 30s is not going to help a Chinese Jew of the millennium. Anyway, so I remember, even so, I went, obviously, well, not obviously, but I graduated in 2014 from Linfield. I remember I got my dream job working with a nonprofit AmeriCorps branch. I lived out in Philadelphia for about a little over a year. And I remember being so dry in Philadelphia. It was so miserable. But the thing is I kept showing up because that's what I was taught to do in this program is show up. I got a sponsor, but I can count on one hand how many times I met with her in over that year. And it was miserable. I got engaged to like a newcomer with like 3.5 years sober because I thought it was a great idea. It's like, I'll save him. So that was awful. And I cut that engagement, but I remember moving home in September of 2015. That's when I met John over there, and I remember I'm like, okay, back to basics. I got to go to a meeting, and that's what I did. The first night I got home and was awake, I went to Jaywalker. I remember approaching the sponsorship coordinator saying, I need a sponsor. I just moved home. I need a sponsor. I remember getting a sponsor that night, and I remember calling her the wrong name because I didn't remember her name because she drove me home, and I was like, "Thank you, Laura." She's like, "It's Lauren," and I was like, "Okay, my bad. I'll see you on like Wednesday or something." And I remember diving back into the book and diving back into the program, and I can't tell you the amount of relief. And I remember in October of 15 is when Seattle hosted the assembly back on the waterfront. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to that. I got voluntold to be the GSR of the Lake City Monday Night Group. Got to be of service and show up to the assembly. And if you've never been to an assembly for our area, they're fabulous. They're great. They give you a headache. You get to see the 12 traditions work at their best and at their worst, but all for the common purpose and common goal of to help the next alcoholic that comes into our rooms. But I remember that's when safety in AA was a huge thing in our area. Oh my gosh, it was like the biggest news since like sliced bread. And I remember we were all at the tables in the center right there on the waterfront, and we were trying to like discuss and bring up like, well, how do we make AA safe with keeping our anonymity and all this stuff, and how do we prevent this predatory behavior or make these statements or yada yada yada. And I remember turning to one of my home group members and being like, I have something to say because I have experience in this, right? Remember when I was telling you, and also have experience with being assaulted and violated by members of this program. I remember going up to the microphone, horrified, because there's like, 800, 1,000 people in these area assemblies. And I remember going up to the microphone being like, I have experience and I was scared and I think it would be really helpful. And I was horrified because I shared part of a story that I thought I never was going to share. You know, I hadn't yet done a four-step around that because I had just moved home. So I remember going up and being so scared and afraid that everyone was going to judge me and everyone was going to be like, "Oh, we don't want her in Alcoholics Anonymous anymore." And I remember after I shared my experience, I ran to the corner crying. I remember Ralph B came up to me in the corner and where I met my service sponsor, Carrie, and they came up to me and they said, "Sasha, turn around." I said, "I don't want to, I'm crying." I said, "Turn around." There were lines at the microphone and a discussion was started on how to keep our fellowship safe. And I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of that. And so, that's where my drive and my passion for service really kicked in when I came home in 2015, in September of 2015. And I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to serve Alcoholics Anonymous in different capacities, right? As John touched on, I got to serve as an alt DCM for this district, which was a humongous blessing. And was touched on that was a very difficult time for me in my sobriety because life stuff happens, right? Whether I'm sober or not, life happens. Sober or drunk, I prefer sober. And so I do what I can to keep my seat warm and even though that means I may be uncomfortable. So, I've gone through the whole list of different service positions. I remember I was a home group member of By the Book, which meets on Sundays. Back it was at the Unity Church in South Lake Union. I remember going there and making coffee. I'd have to so the meeting started at 8. I got there at 6 o'clock to make sure that we had enough coffee to serve our fellowship of over 200 folks that attended that meeting every night or every Sunday night. And I loved it. I remember my sponsor reminded me of the things that we are all suggested to do: get a home group, get a service position, right? And I'll get the sponsor. Right? I had my sponsor, right? But she's like, get a service position that you don't like. And I said, why? She said, it'll get you out of yourself and it'll keep you accountable. I said, crap. So I remember I did the butt ranger for a long time. And, but luckily not luckily, I smoked. So it kind of worked out. But, I remember, I loved it because I got to boss people around and be like, put your butts in the butt can. But it can turn fun. You just got to make it your own. But what it's like now, if you're bad at math, I have, by the grace of God, 13 years sober in last December. It's so, my life today, even looking from when I moved home to today, is so different. I mentioned chasing my mom around the house with a butcher knife, right? Y'all remember that, right? I get y'all horrified of me now. Hope not. But I remember thinking my mom was like ruining my whole life, ruining my drinking career, ruining my experience of being a college student, being a late teen, a young adult, if you will. And I remember wanting to get emancipated from her at the time because I'm like, I'm 16, I can do what I want, right? I'm a grown butt woman. Oops. I'm a grown woman. I can do what I want. And after doing some work around my mom, a 4 and 8 and 9 around my mom, what I saw as control, manipulation, her attempt to ruin my whole life, right? I see as unconditional love. I see as that she never did actually give up on me. And today that woman is the woman of my heart. Like as corny as it sounds, I don't care. She is the woman of my heart. And I make it a point to show her because honestly, like sorry is not going to cut it for the way I treated her. I have that opportunity today to continuously do a living amends for my mom for all the horror and turmoil that I put her through. So actually, she came over to my house today, and I just moved, and I got to show her around the house, and I'm so happy I made time for my mom because I love making time for my mom. I'm such a mommy's girl, y'all. Oh, it's so corny, but I don't even really care. I really don't. And she actually just got back from a big trip to Europe and Iceland because she gets to go to Iceland. And She went to Argentina and got to go to the bottom thing, Antarctica, for doing all these travels and stuff. And I remember I wasn't going to be able to pick her up from the airport either time, but I remember showing up at the airport and surprising her. And this is the biggest gift that I get to do for my mom, is show up and be the daughter that she lost in my alcoholism. What a gift. That's, to me, a humongous gift. And I'm so grateful that I have that opportunity to show up and be a daughter for her. I have a job. I have a career. Like, who would have thunk? I'm a first responder in the city of Seattle. And that is something that I never thought I would get the opportunity to do. As a certified peer counselor in the state of Washington, I have that opportunity to serve in a peer role as a first responder, which is so stinking cool, right? To me, I get to share that recovery is possible with folks that are struggling. I get to be a star in people's darkest days, and that is also truly a humongous gift and blessing. As I mentioned, I just moved. I moved in with my partner. We have a townhouse with 3 cats and a garage. Like, I have a garage. Like, I'm adulting. I never thought I would have a garage. I have an amazing group of young women that I get the opportunity to also walk through the book with, and how I was taken through the book. And also, like, several of my sponsees have made it that we get to go through the traditions now, which is super cool. I have a very full, beautiful life. And it's not always rainbows and unicorns and pizza and whatever sunshine. It's not. I've gone through some of the most difficult, challenging times in my sobriety, and thank God for this fellowship. Because when I thought God had abandoned me, the fellowship was there, and that's how I saw God show up in my life. I've lost a lot of people in these rooms. In my 13 years sober, I've lost a lot of people. My mom tells me I have to stop counting, and I said, my response to her was like, I know, but I can't. However, that number, it reminds me to continue to do what I do, or else I'll just be another number. Several of my best friends have taken their life to this disease and to this, and death is something, and loss is something that I don't do well. I don't think a lot of us do well. I'm very bad at hiding it, though. I will ugly cry for days and days. My sponsor pointed out, though, isn't that a cool thing that you get to feel big feelings and not have to drink over them? And initially it's like, well, screw you, I don't want to feel these things. But it's so cool. I don't have to drink over big feelings. I drank because it was like a Tuesday. So the fact that I don't have to drink over big feelings, good, bad, ugly, whatever, is amazing. What a blessing. I'm so grateful that I get to be an active member of society where people aren't scared of me and I'm not scared of people. I get to be an active participant a member of this fellowship. I get to be an active participant in my career. I get to be an active participant in my life. I was so checked out for those 3-ish years that I was nonstop drunk. But see, I thought that was normal. I thought that every 16-year-old did that. But again, the doctor's opinion tells me that I can no longer differentiate the true from the false. My alcoholic life seems the only normal. So the fact that this program that's outlined in this book has shown me this new way of life that I get to be a part of, that it's shown me a new sense of normal, which is going to meetings, being in contact with my sponsors, working with sponsees and serving other alcoholics in this fellowship in any way I can, being of service to this fellowship. And as our first speaker said, showing up and being accountable, being a responsible adult, like keeping the house clean, right? Um, Showing up for my mom and being that daughter that she lost, right? And so I'm so grateful that I get to be an active member of my life today, and I don't have to check out when these big life things happen. I don't, and I mean, it's something that I never. And I still got some time. I remember when I was drinking. It's gonna get a little morbid, but I promise it'll get happier. I remember when I was drinking, I didn't care to live to 25, and this is when I was at 17, 18, towards the very end of my drinking. I didn't care to live to past 25. I didn't care if I lived or died. If alcohol didn't kill me first, I was going to kill myself. By the time I was 25, that was my plan. It was in my planner. Because that's how miserable my life got. And I remember after I got sober for some time, I was talking to a friend of mine from the Lake City Young People's Group. And she says, she also had gotten sober around relatively young. And she says, I was like, yeah, man, I feel like I missed out. And she goes like, well, Sasha, how miserable did your life have to get for you to stay sober at such a young age? And I said, oh yeah, pretty miserable. And that's something I never have to forget is that feeling of hopelessness and despair. Now I can't wrap myself up in those feelings, but I personally can never forget where I came from, because I was just telling this to a sponsee that I'm no further away from that next drink than the person that walks in with 24 hours. I know that I'm not, because I'm not that special. I know that I am just as malleable, to a next drink than the person next to me. What I have the opportunity to do every day is aim to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life in conscious contact with a higher power, in order for me to maintain that and work with another alcoholic to assure that immunity from the next drink, because that's also what God tells me. And I'm so grateful that I've learned all these things along the way, and that I still get to learn new things along the way. So I'm still on this journey. I want to forever ride this journey, because it is a beautiful one, for me at least. And I hope that yours, whatever you're going through, maybe a couple little bumps in the road here and there, I hope that you just keep trudging. Because from my experience, this journey that I've been on has been so worth it. And so, again, I'd like to thank all of y'all for showing up this evening. As Mikey mentioned, it's been a heavy weekend for our fellowship here in Seattle. So I appreciate y'all showing up this evening. And thank you for letting me be of service to this group. And I'll take another 24. Thank you.
Thanks.